Yeah. So tell us what happened in your group.
So we had rangers arrive on scene and take the participant out to speak with them. They had good response and they called for medical right away. They established incident command and got a good perimeter set. And they did not ask if the service dog was registered or not. It was assumed because it was assumed that it was Flipside and only service dogs were allowed at the event.
Okay.
So there was, they did not ask what the service dogs was for from the friend, but they did get the dog under control and pulled away from the scene a short distance to give medics room to work. And then they got the patient into a medical cart after she was stabilized and taken to medical tent where she was monitored.
Okay. Okay. I would like to hear from Chairman next what happened in her group, and then Firefly, I want to come back to you so you can talk about what we were talking about earlier. Okay. Okay. Chairman, can you share what happened with your group?
My group was approached by an agitated participant who had concerns about a friend, but the music was really loud, so we didn't get much information from him in the beginning. They followed him into the dome, at which point R12 was called to come give further assistance to the incident. They observed a lady who was laying on the ground and convulsing, at which point they called in medical. The deducing whether or not it was a service dog or not didn't happen until the end. The dog stayed aggressive, but they did eventually were able to communicate with the initial agitated participant that was concerned about the friend to find out that she had friends nearby, and they were able to find and bring them back to the participant, at which point they were able to approach and assess the situation because the dog was no longer as aggressive once the friend was around and they woke up. I don't think, incident command was established when the R12 came on and the actual was called in, and there was a debrief at HQ. Yeah.
Okay. Firefly, go ahead and tell us about your experience with service dogs.
So at an event, a service dog burns are very, very stressful environments, even especially for four-legged animals. Service animals are trained to be in those environments to an extent, but it is the handler's responsibility to keep the dog under control. So the dog should be on a leash. If a handler gets sick, a service dog should not bite. But if a situation is stressful enough and the dog does, you should treat the animal as restrain it. Otherwise, it may bite people around you. But for the most part, if you approach a participant who has a dog that is alerting, that dog is going to want to get them help. And that dog is going to want to make sure they are taken care of. So you can usually find, if they have a vest with a pocket, check the pocket. Oftentimes handlers will put a medical card in there so that you can get a little bit more medical information. If they have a patch on it that says do not separate from handler, the dog, you may get more of an aggressive response if you try to pull the dog away. The dog may be trained to stick to their side. But checking a dog's vest gives a lot of information and a lot of clues to what the situation might be. They might have a patch that says what they're the type of dog for. Oftentimes that should be your first question is, what type of service dog is this? And sometimes if they have a friend with them who knows them, they will be able to tell you what the dog's main task is. If I have a friend with me, I personally have a service dog that goes to burns with me. And she is, if I'm in a sound camp, she will have headphones on over her ears. And no one around will be able to give her commands unless they're taken off, because she only responds to hand commands when she has her headphones on. So if you have dogs are going to have different equipment on and react in different ways. And but finding out the type of service dog is the first thing to help with the diagnosis. This type of thing would be very obvious, but if there are multiple things that dog was working on, perhaps blood sugar, it could complicate the situation. And asking their friends for that information off the bat is always a good thing. Friends often know how to handle the dog if they are with the person and will be able to tell you. And if you have any questions about service dogs before you ranger or take a safety shift, take a look at the ADA laws. I have a link that I can put into chat that is for the, here, I'm gonna put a link in chat for the ADA updated regulations and what handler responsibilities are for a dog and what their behavior should be. But I guess the famous one at Flipside, if you guys or anybody is with Flipside, is the person who had the dog Fred. And that was not a service dog, and that is not how a service dog will act.
Right.
If you have a service dog will always be on a leash unless one of their tasks is very specifically something that they cannot be on a leash for. You may see a service dog off of a leash, and if they are going to be glued next to their person's side. They are not going to go outside of a range of a leash unless they're doing a task. So they're highly trained animals. They are a medical device, and at Flipside, it is safe to assume that a dog you see there is a service dog. And one thing our group brought up that is a good thing to ask is, if you need to handle a service dog, can you give them a treat? And the answer is no, not unless you have permission from their handler, because the dog might have a food allergy. It might not be treat trained. It might respond in different ways to a treat that they might assume that's an off-duty thing. Each dog is trained and handled in a different way. So the key is going to be communicating with the people around that person and asking how the dog needs to be handled and what next steps need to be. If you ask a service dog, some of them do this, but if you ask them what's wrong, you just say what's wrong or show me, a lot of them will actually go and either paw at their owner, or if the person has a medication in their bag that they need, sometimes the dog will go and point at it or get it. So asking the dog is actually a good thing to do. Speaking of asking one, here is mine sitting right next to me. So for me personally, if you ask her what is wrong, she will tell you if my blood sugar is low or if I'm having seizure activity. And It was suggested earlier, asked if you could get a sheet on some information. I'd be happy to type up some information for the people to have as kind of a quick guide to interacting with service dogs.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know when we have dealt with service dogs in the past that we do train our people that as far as ADA goes, you're not allowed to ask the person what their disability is, but you are allowed to ask what is the service that your dog is trained to do. That I know is a question you're legally allowed to ask. For events like Flipside, they're supposed to register their service dog ahead of time. So that should be in a lot of cases, LLC or actual will know who that dog is and how to and how at least know where to go for more information if they need help with handling it. But thank you for giving us those things to consider. Any other concerns or anything else that came up that we want to discuss real quick before we go to the next one?
Unless I'm mistaken, Flipside doesn't verify that is something as a service animal, and that's why there have been some incidents in the past.
You can't. I mean, there's no registered database of service animals, and there's no actual certification.
Yeah, and it's a liability thing, if I understand correctly. That if you do verify that is like a service animal, that you then take on more liability if something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, at Mischievia, we never. We basically said, as a courtesy, can you please tell us if you have a service animal that you're bringing? And we just kind of have left it at that. We never looked them up or anything like that.
There is no way to look it up. Those
Right.
national registries are a $25 scam.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a vest that they send you with a patch and a thing that you pay $25 for online in order for them to give you a little certificate.
Right, and anybody can get one.
The closest thing somebody might have is if it's an agency trained dog or goes through an agency testing, but you can have handler trained dogs and owner training. So half of her training was owner training, and then I went through agency testing just so that people would not give me the hard times that I knew we would get around Austin where everybody has dogs. So I did that more for the public than for myself. It was not necessary or.
No, when I was on the LLC flip side, we hoped that participants would tell us in advance they're coming with a service dog. We would try to do a little bit of intel to make sure that was a legitimate animal. Of course, that got elevated with the service dog incident years ago, but everyone is correct there. Since we don't have any kind of specific document to verify, then it's a pretty hard question. So we hope people are honest and good-natured about their animals. We have kicked people out for bringing animals that were not service dogs at all. We gave them a chance to get their dog off site, and they pretty much blew it, so we kicked them out.
Okay. Anything else before we move on?
Am I good? Anyone else?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I thought our team did absolutely everything right. I think you let us off the hook with being able to control the dog and not have to directly intervene. And I'm just curious if, I guess my instinct was that whilst it was great to go find somebody who could control the dog, I wondered if, I think my instinct would have been to try to see how we could have actually cleared the dome of people and actually see whether the dog moved or actually my instinct was, hey, can we grab a top and actually just wrap this dog and let medical respond to somebody who's unresponsive in a quicker manner. And I just wondered if anybody would critique that approach.
I would actually. That's why when I was in your scenario and I was your medic, I approached the dog with caution and used routine universal hand commands for animals. I am actually researched and am getting my own service dog, and a lot of service dogs or a lot of owners get harnesses that actually have pull cords and on the side of the dog so that when you approach the dog and talk to the dog and ask them what's wrong, they can pull a pull cord off the side of their shoulder that will hand you a packet or a card laminated that tells you the medical condition of the person and what the service dog is there for. And if they actually have a pull cord on the other side, sometimes they can pull, and that's the medicine for that particular incident for that particular person. If you wrap the dog, you are more likely to get bit, and you're actually impeding the service of that animal to that person. And it can actually be detrimental to the person as well as the dog, as well as yourself in getting bit.
Medical, could someone from medical clarify too? Because I was thinking as a ranger on scene that if they were having a seizure, that really short of after the seizure, making sure that their airway is clear, there's not really a lot that you can do other than let them go through, you know, you don't want to overstress them in that experience. So I figured that making a perimeter, keeping everyone away from the dog was the best way to handle that at that time.
Also, Sweeney, flip side, we have a sound marshal, and they'll have somebody on duty every day, and that sound marshal could be called in to help you turn down the sound or turn it off at the camp, and take out that part of the equation. Obviously, the crowd will then disperse, so your perimeter needs to be good, structured perimeter when you do that, and people will be nosy because that's the way they are, and they're going to try to look in on the situation. So your perimeter is important. So before you turn the sound off, have a perimeter, then have the sound marshal go in there and say, "Hey, shut this off. We got an emergency medical situation here." And
I was curious about that too, if we had a sound marshal, since we didn't have one assigned, if that's something that's at someone that's at all the events now, typically.
Right. And I think it is kind of unique to our local burns. I mean, I think there are a few other burns that have them, but it's not a universal thing.
we had to put sound marshals in play because we had sound volume problems in the early years, and the surrounding landowners calling the sheriff on us. And so sound marshals were more technical team to help us control that, but have turned into a resource because they know how to speak the lingo of the DJ, so to speak, and approach the DJ and not piss them off because they got a great scene going. So we established something called Defcon 10, and that would be all sound systems go off, but they could walk up to an individual camp and say, "Hey guys, you got a situation here, shut it down."
But the actual or LLC board member or whatever also should instantly be able to say, "Hey, we need this down. We've got a medical situation."
Yeah, just anytime you got a call that you know is going to be around a sound camp, I would advise, if you're at safety side or at flip side, I'd advise getting the sound marshal rolling. Just because they have already established a relationship with that DJ in advance. And, you know, even as a AAR, I walked up on those situations and I was an unknown factor to that individual. And, you know, I had to play the AAR card, which is bullshit. And, you know, but I had to do it to get this guy to shut down. So have a sound camp in the situation. That will help you greatly to turn down that noise.
Yeah, when you're going on shift, it is helpful to know whether there are sound marshals on shift at that time. Sometimes at flip side, we're able to get them, the schedule filled for sound marshals for evening shifts, but a lot of times there's not necessarily anybody awake in the daylight hours. So if this is going on at 10 a.m., it very well, there may not be a sound marshal on shift. So Whether you're dirt ranger or khaki or whatever, if you're going out on shift, kind of glance at that board and ask what the status is, whether there are sound marshals. That may help you.
Just clarify what Apple talked about the board at the Ranger HQ. There's a big whiteboard that has all the shifts of the different safety leads, and you'll see names on there who's in charge for those shifts. So that's a very useful piece of information to start your shift, is to go look at it, see who's on board.
I want to say something about medical as far as assessment. Someone said, oh, they should have been checking airway. In our situation, like me as medical, like I don't care what I'm doing. If I'm just shooting the shit about bacon, like it's an assessment. I thought we did a real good job about verbalizing the condition of the patient, that they were starting to come around, and therefore they were speaking, or not necessarily speaking, they were breathing and moving in a normal neurological way. So like medical doesn't always have to like say everything they're doing, because it is a constant assessment. But I thought we did a real good job in ours, like even like saying their condition.
Awesome.
One other thing to note, for perimeter in a situation like this, if people see you struggling with a dog, they may just try to help because they think they're dog people. And they might make kissy noises and try to get the dog to come to them, trying to help, not being obnoxious or anything, but they think they're doing a good thing. And that could agitate the dog more and just cause even more situation to be noisy and distracting. So when building a perimeter, you're also going to have to consider people trying to help too much.
I wanted to circle back, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
The question of when you have an internal space, I mean, we were talking about a dome, is it good practice to clear that space? So the establishment of perimeters are basically evacuating that space for anybody who doesn't need to be involved in the incident. The problem that I can see is you've got a bunch of people coming out of an entrance. If there's only one entrance, does that impede people coming in who need to deal with the incident? And just some thoughts on that. I'd appreciate that.
I think that would depend on the size, how many people were in it. If there's only like 10 or 12 people, it's probably pretty easy to clear them out. I think there's some factors that you would probably have to consider.
When you if you get the sound camp to turn off or turn down, if you don't have a whole lot of a crowd, they'll probably disperse and go find some sound somewhere else too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the party people want to keep the party going. So if you make it not fun anymore, and especially if you can say they're giving away waffles down the street or give them something fun to do elsewhere, then that's an excuse for them to mind their own business. You can say, we want to establish some patient privacy, and we want to, make sure the medics have room to work, and blah, blah, blah. But sometimes they just want to party. And so giving them a different place to be partying is a really valuable key to remember.
I think they just opened up the grilled cheese, guys.
Or you can stand around here and help me with perimeter, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, deuces, bye.
That's that Ranger food you're using there.
Blue Bonnet, you have a question?
There's a couple of comments. Tingles, so our scenario went really, really well. And my hey, can y'all pause between transmissions conversations? It was more of, because as khaki, I had to ignore all of the conversations that were happening. And so all of this assessment of medical that's going on, that a perimeter was established, unless someone directly radios khaki. And so that's why sometimes I'm trying to interject, and even though y'all were in the middle of your conversation, those types of interactions would still happen. So I was only communicating with Apple, who had established as command. And so that was something that I think real life would work really, really well. It's just that little Zello component of hey, I know y'all are trying to communicate, but I'm trying to establish information. so even though I wasn't supposed to hear everything that was going on, it was really good to know that. And then like a debrief could be recorded of like XYZ had happened. So yeah, Tingles, you're like, that was really awesome. That would be something, I don't remember if Apple did this, but R12 would then check in when I'm like doing a status update and say medical has assessed, or medical might radio me directly. And like the radio communication smooths itself out with practice. And the second thing, if a different direction, if your burn either doesn't have a sound marshal at all or no one on shift, that's also where it's really important that rangers have social capital and know people like who run a camp. Like I know just some of the people who run a sound camp, like I might not know the DJ, but like Doing It Loud, I met them at my very first Flipside. And those are people I could go over to and be like, hey, Jim, we've got this thing going on. Can you help us? Like, whereas the camp lead could go talk to him because I have that established relationship. So that might be, that's just another resource you have and where it's important to build our community.
Yeah, I thought it was
resources.
I thought it was pretty understood in ours that because someone said like let's not go back and forth with chat and everything, that let's do everything on radio, that some of it wasn't necessarily radio comm, it was just kind of like for the scenario, like doing, you know, let everyone know what we're doing for prosperity's sake. So like, you know, I thought this one ran really great. And everyone kind of understood what you meant by like slow down radio chatter.
Okay. Papa Smurf is next, and then Chairman.
So Angela was kind of, Tangles was kind of hitting on a little bit what I wanted to talk about. There was a little bit confusion, I think, when we were talking about what we were doing versus the radio communication. And some of it felt like it got mixed a little bit. Which wouldn't happen in scenario on site, I feel. So I don't know, like in what way we can do the future to make that more apparent there, where it's scenario description versus radio chatter.
Just saying subscription, or like let's just come up with a word instead of like khaki, just say like a scene or something, like just a word.
I was following that it was only conversation, but like in an actual scenario, khaki would be able to interrupt. And so I guess it's in real life, y'all would be carrying on that conversation and khaki would be able to. It's just the means by which we were communicating is just the only, like, I don't think there was necessarily an issue with it. And we also had the text chat to like drop things in, but I thought it went really, really well.
Yeah, I could have maybe facilitated some of the information better, and like have a conversation with the DM versus, I don't know, like, we don't know if we could like figure out a way to do some of it in text chat. And then like I texted Mumbles at one point, and was when he'd mentioned the thing about checking to see if there was a service animal, and I like just directly sent him the information, like maybe being able to do more DM stuff that way would be good.
How did that work? I mean, was that easy enough to do without losing focus?
Yeah, because I was already texting Mumbles, so I was just like, hey, you found out this information.
Okay.
So that it wasn't available to everybody else in the chat, but he was able to, say that he'd found it or something. On the note of sound marshal stuff, I run a theme camp, and they like to do music crap. And I have all of my friends that DJ sound marshal, period. Like, guess what? You're volunteering for the thingy, and I want you to volunteer for this, because people that do DJ and do music, man, Sparky's right. They can speak in a language that's not just turn the volume down. I've stood outside a sound camp on a graveyard shift And we've told them to turn the sound down, and I'm standing there and I'm like, well, they turned the volume down, but when it does this warbly peak thing every 30 seconds, it's like, this is what's getting that piercing noise all the way across the freezer burn field. Like, what is that? Can we turn that part down? And, communicate with them, and they'll go over and do that. I don't know what that thing is, but a DJ does. So encourage your friends that DJ to, volunteer. And I've found that a few people that I have talked into it, come back that, they have a good time. They spend 6 hours running around to all of the sound camps, meeting the other DJs and talking with them about what they do and their stuff, right? So that's my sound thing.
Awesome. Thank you. Apple? You're muted.
Right. Okay. So what was the must report situation in this case? Why was it a must report? Anyone?
Medical emergency.
Why?
Because the patient became incapacitated and unconscious.
Unconscious. That's the key. So the three things that constitute medical emergency, in no matter pretty much wherever you are, unconscious, trouble breathing, uncontrolled bleeding, and unconscious definitely is right up there. So in this case, it was a must report. Was there any other must report available in this situation?
Yeah, the dog and its potential to injure more participants.
Okay. The definition that we use for flip side is grave danger. And I read that as going to the grave, right? Could somebody die as a result of this? Of the dog? Probably not, but they could go to the emergency room, very likely, if they got bit. So, if there's almost certainly going to be an insurance claim, probably go ahead and report it.
One other thing, I highly recommend, like I do dirt shifts at Flipside on burn night, and I have had to help clear the road because someone was leaving in an emergency situation. So I think there might be in Apple or Geo or Sparky, you can speak to this, if there's like a shift time that you're more likely to have somebody leave in the burn, or is it just a crapshoot of like, no, it's just really hot, a bunch of people are going to be passing out? Because when I'm on burn shift, I kind of expect to have to clear the path for an emergency vehicle. I don't know if it's just because I'm pessimistic, or is this just everybody should be aware? And also, can y'all very quickly run through like what to expect if you have to get the road cleared, if like you're a dirt ranger?
The road should always be maintained clear. I mean, nothing should be blocking the road for more than 30 seconds. And that's if they're trying to park their RV or something, Honestly, if shit can go sideways any time of day, and we always need those roads to be maintained in a clear or can be cleared very rapidly situation. So does that answer that?
Yeah, I mean, that one night, I just remember we had to clear the road and it was really loud. We were in Sound Camp Central and I was yelling at participants, and it reached a point where I just used expletives, and Jorge's like, it's okay, because people did not understand it was an actual medical emergency. And I know that is not, what I should be doing, but frankly, I was going to take the hit on expletives because there was somebody leaving in an ambulance. So it's just be mindful of people. And it reached the point where it was like arm gestures, like get out of the road, because saying, hey, y'all, you need to get out of the road. And, like I said, it probably wasn't the best, but it was like this panic. We've got an ambulance coming.
There's actually a trick you can use at nighttime that works better at night than it does during the day. Hey, you, hippie mace, hippie mace them right in the eyeballs and say, we need to keep this road clear, and then back in their eyeballs. It's rude. It's rude. If you've got a headlight on, you can kind of subtly do it, right? And then whatever. But That's hippie mace. They will get out of there. If you're blinding them, they're like, oh man, and you just kind of, it's not as bright over there.
All right, guys, it is 2:45. I would like to continue with the next scenario. I do see Hard Knocks came in. Hard Knocks, would you like to be on a Ranger team for this one?
Well, I'll share with people on right now the incident with the naked man. Our Cheese Pants was bringing up having a pants protocol. So one year we had a runner towards the fire. He self-acclimated very quickly and ran back to the crowd, which we then were able to greet him and get him over to HQ. He was well underway to having his own experience, let's say. And so after lots of negotiation, we couldn't get him to calm down. So we called in the county ambulance. At that time, we did not have an on-site service. But this was one of the reasons why we do now. So the county services picked him up, got him in the ambulance, and they're driving down some back road, county road out in the dark to go to the hospital. And somehow he convinced the ambulance crew to stop to let him take a leak. And these guys were dumb enough, I guess, to do that. He jumped out the back and took off running down this dark county road, totally nude. And I'm talking about at a full sprint. He is gone. And they're just like, oh my God, what'd we do? So they chased him down and somehow convinced him to get back in if they would bring him back to the event and not take him to the hospital, which was a huge violation of their responsibility. They get to past the gate and coming into the second gate where we have our greeter station, and he jumps out the ambulance on his own and takes off running into the event. So now we got Naked Running Man Part 2. So our incident did turn into a second incident. And we had all calm search for the Naked Man during our burn night. So they were able to locate him, and he unfortunately left the event in handcuffs instead of on a stretcher, which he would have been a lot better off. So yeah, we do have no pants scenarios, cheese pants that really do occur.
My first khaki shift, like Alchemy 2014, had a guy with no pants that ran sprinting away from Rangers, allegedly yelling, "Rangers won't take me alive." I have no evidence he said that, but it makes the story better. Rangers aren't chasing him because we're Rangers. And in the process of trying to escape the Rangers, who were trying to Ranger him for sexually harassing someone at a sound camp, threw his clothes in a burn barrel. Could not find where his camp was, did not know where his keys were in the middle of ejecting him, which I was just the khaki, wasn't my call at that point. But finally, we had to give him a pair of sweatpants and t-shirt, and his friend, the one friend of his we could locate, wanted nothing to do with him as far as driving him back to Atlanta or anything. We finally had to put him up in a motel because we couldn't reach anybody. He had no phone, he had no keys, and he was being ejected.
Wow. Yeah, his campmates didn't want to deal with him either, and so he became our responsibility, and in that case, he became the LEO responsibility. Yeah, I guess we need to figure out a way to find out if you're a no pants risk and have a special wristband put on you, like a fall risk.
I'm
Come in the gate.
I swear I'm going to add emergency pants to our Ranger inventory.
The other team is starting to wrap up. But please continue the no pants stories.
Well, you know, he was a handsome fella and it was in good shape. But boy, his mind was going 100 miles a minute for his state of mind at the moment. And it was interesting to hear him, you know, talk and with no nonsense, but with a direct course of action. I mean, it was just kind of crazy, but that was the situation where I told you our LEO came on site when we called him in to escort him off the premise, and they did an excellent job of handling it. It wasn't a rough, you know, tackle, beat you with a baton, put handcuffs on you. It was a very peaceful way of getting the guy in the back of his patrol car and said, you know, hey, let's go get you taken care of. And they, I don't recall if they took him to the hospital first and then to the jail, but he was released the next day. And I think he came back on site because that was the Exodus. He came back on site to get his stuff. So having that working relationship with your local law enforcement is very, very handy.
We actually, to the moon, just moved property that was going to be last year. Now this year will be our first year because we had a fantastic relationship with the sheriff at our old property. Then that sheriff retired, and the new one declared war on us. The new one stated, "I'm doing everything I can to get these people out of my county." We were basically under siege the entire 2019 event because this new sheriff was doing everything he could to harass us.
Well, when we met our sheriff, who has since passed away from our current location, he politely, carefully, I don't know, very Candace line way, told us to, or recommended to us that we hire his off-duty deputies for outside security, just like you would have at an event. And that actually worked very well. And so these guys became our advocates in a different way. You know, we put that warning out that obey all state, local, state, and federal laws in the documentation you receive when you get your ticket. And this kind of was a good, healthy reminder to see these guys at every other intersection on these county roads, staging where we asked them to be. Of course, it put them, you know, very quickly, quick response if we needed them. We became friends with the individual deputies, and we had the first year this happened, we have a certain way we want you to come down the county roads to come into the event because of a bridge. If you came a wrong way, it could be problematic for trailers and trucks and whatnot. So this group of folks in a sedan, it was my, you know, car full of young people, turned the wrong way, and they're headed down the property owner's other road, a dirt road, away from the event towards a cornfield. And so there was a deputy there to remind people not to use the bridge. Well, he takes off after him down this dirt road. And he didn't have sirens going on, but they wouldn't stop. He's blinking his lights. So he finally turned on his flasher, his overheads, and they pulled over. And these kids are like, oh man, we're busted, you know. And the deputy walks up and goes, hey, y'all going to that camp out thing, Flipside? And they're looking like, should we say yes or no? And they say, yeah, I'll go that. He goes, well, you made a wrong turn. You turn around and go back this way. And I'm sure they all had to go clean their britches because that was probably a hair-raising experience for them. But the deputy was real nice and just said, yeah, turn around and go back this way.
Another thing that really helps too, not only trying to maintain a good relationship with your law enforcement, but sometimes having a good relationship with another agency helps, because with the new sheriff, and I'm not going to go into all the stuff they did to harass us, but it was bad because it would, I don't know when the other channel will be done. But I mean, it was horrific. But the local fire department, we had built such good relationships with that they were doing everything they could to run interference with us with the sheriff. They actually ended up slipping me and my co-event leads a police scanner radio so that we could get some early warning, because the sheriff was trying to get a warrant to come in on us en masse in the middle of our effigy burn.
Oh.
When we're in the middle of trying to manage a structure burn. And the fire department was on site and they were well aware of everything going on. And they even slipped me a police scanner radio so that I might be able to get some early warning if they were getting ready to come in, stuff like that. You know.
And this was all in such stark contrast to the previous 3 years with the other sheriff, who we actually had a good working relationship with. They were very welcoming. Like,
the new sheriff, the old sheriff was great. And we, same thing, we hired our old property. We had a roadway that ran along one border of the property and actually bisected at one point because there was an area of camping on the other side of the road. And it was just, there was nothing but a few people who lived down that road, but to keep rubberneckers from driving down it, we'd hire an off-duty sheriff's deputy who would just sit down there, and unless you lived down that road, you weren't allowed to come down it. And the new sheriff wouldn't even let us do that.
All right, guys. Hold on, Sparky. The other team just finished up and is back. So y'all ready to shift to debrief? Okay. All right, let's hear from where is Firefly? You guys want to go first?
She's there.
I'm having some technical difficulties.
We can hear you.
Okay, you might get some background. So our team did well, mobilized and established command, and then after they evaluated the situation, they called in for heavy equipment. And one thing that we discussed was that the heavy equipment was coming from the event and not from outside fire. But they called for, here, 1 second, I'm getting way too much background. Yours is echoing. Sorry about that. I had to go into the room. 1 second.
Maybe I can help.
Okay, so we established command and had heavy equipment come in. They safely extracted the passenger from the vehicle and then went on a hunt for the naked man. We had I'm sorry, I am just zoned out at the moment. We mobilized medical and fire for the equipment, and they, here, I am sorry. Over, please. Quick finger.
Okay, so I was khaki, so I was taking notes, and I was trying to only take notes on things that were either clearly on the radio or said to me, because like we said, we had a lot of conversation back and forth with the Zello, and sometimes it's hard to tell what's description and what's in person and what's on the radio. So I was, as khaki, I was taking notes on anything that was obviously coming across the radio. So we had, the Rangers arrived on the scene and saw what was going on, and radioed in with the location, but the description of the incident could have been a little bit better when we're talking to khaki there. And so I called fire, and then fire asked for more details. I'm like, he didn't give me those details. And so there was a little bit of back and forth there. And then very quickly it became apparent to the Rangers on the ground that this is not a standard thing. Like we need to do an all comp. So they did what we would call an orange vest at Flipside, but they didn't call it that. The Ranger called all con and asked for fire, medical, sanctuary, and everybody. And then everybody chimed in, responding, en route, what have you. So it was nice that they didn't waste a lot of time there. Like they escalated that very quickly. And they also called for actual, of course. And they mentioned that, we've got possible multiple injuries and we've got a destabilized structure. And so they got fire and everybody in there, and then fire was able to stabilize the structure and get the victims out. They canceled at one point they made a request for outside equipment, and that was canceled when fire was able to stabilize the structure. They got the patient extricated. The owner of the vehicle came and started freaking out, of course. And then so actual and sanctuary dealt with the owner to try and calm him down, and then eventually they found the driver. And I'm sorry, they got the scene cleaned up, and then as they're closing the incident at the scene, they found the driver. And so they basically convinced the driver to come with them. It was unclear the way the sequence ran, whether they were going to headquarters or medical, but either way, they escorted the driver and and then they radioed to have actual meet them at Ranger headquarters or medical, whichever one it was they were headed to. I don't have the notes in front of me as far as like what the key things were to watch out for. Sparky gave us a debrief within the session. If you want to chime in there, Sparky.
The usual things, we want to think about our five-fold path of ICS. Remember to state your calling in an incident, you're establishing command and where you're located. And like you said, we did get things rolling pretty quickly. But on that initial assessment, you need to kind of tell us a little bit more about what's going on. And that way I need to know what to bring from the fire station. Am I expecting there to be something on fire, or do I need to bring some assets to help me stabilize a vehicle involved in an accident? And then make sure you do that demobilization, clear it up. And it's good for incident command to check in with all the departments instead of waiting for the departments to check with you. So whatever resources you've got on site, check back with them and say, is medical clear? Yes, medical clear. All our units headed back to quarters. That kind of language helps know everything's clear. But all in all, real good. The other thing I did suggest is it almost turned into two incidences. We stabilized the accident, took care of patients and the surrounding camps and the pissed off car owner. The guy with the cape and the green boots with no pants, he almost became a separate incident, trying to find him. So it's okay to have two incidences, close one, and that way all those other resources can go away, and the Rangers and perimeter and actual can be working on finding this chucklehead. which may involve LEO because it's potential theft of our car. Just because it's an R car doesn't mean you get to take off in somebody's property, right? So think about that when you're closing out, but they did a good job.
Good. Chairman, are you able to report out what happened with your group?
I took notes this time, so.
Yay.
So my scenarios team saw the armadillo car crash, and what actual closed the gate because of the runner. Things started to become overwhelming for the ranger that had assumed IC. So there was a transfer of command to Blue Bonnet, and that went really well. So you guys always gotta remember that it's okay to, transfer command if you're, uncomfortable with it for, whatever reason or not. And that's also why we have sanctuary services. Fire came in and assessed the structure. Medical assessed the participant and, saw that the futon was at risk and that the participant couldn't get out. They called in site ops for backup stabilizing the structure. They learned from the neighbors that that there was a family that lived in the camp. They sent a sanctuary team to go look for the family and make sure that the family and the children were okay. Actual kept the gate closed during this time and kept the clock on whether or not it was a missing or not missing, absent child incident, which it was not. So my team didn't immediately send somebody to look for Mr. No Pants. So we didn't really interact with No Pants until the very end. But I think that they did the sanctuary did a good job, consoling the family and discussing with them. I felt like medical did a good job assessing the situation, and fire did too, and transfer of command went well. That's all I got. It's a little shittier than I thought.
One thing in our group that we didn't end up doing was the neighbor camp. Those folks knew what the family looked like and they described them to the command and rangers, but they could have easily gone and helped sanctuary look for the right family down at the river. So that was a resource that could have been pulled in. We didn't in our scene end up looking right away for other victims. When we came upon the scene, the concern was the victim, the people we could see, the person in the back seat and the guy that ran off, and then the structure and so forth. But it took us quite a while to really kind of do is anybody else that we can't see in harm's way? And I don't think I heard that happen.
There was definitely a lot of radio chatter, and it was kind of hard. Like, I was in my head about what I would be doing, but I wasn't able to say it a lot of time.
Yeah.
Sweeney, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think taking part in that, if I were actual in that scene, I'd be like, oh man, I got a long night and probably into the next day ahead of me to kind of mop up on the incident. I think part of the demobilization would be making sure that people had eyes and were accompanying people who were witnesses to this. I think as actual, I would be wanting to meet with them, talk to them. The immediate priority, I think, probably was taking our agent of chaos. And usually my approach with that is try and find friends who will acknowledge fact that they actually need then to take on the responsibility and do containment using obviously altered. It's a wake up the next morning and answer what you did. I activated the Lost Child Protocol, and I kind of jumped on Blue Bonnet as his commander a little bit, but it was still kind of unclear. But I think my first instinct as actual is to there's no harm in closing gate and alerting them and stopping any vehicle traffic leaving site if we don't have knowledge of the whereabouts of a child. There's a lot to unpack as an LLC board member after an incident like this, and I think some of the things that I'm not going to go through all of them, but my instincts would be there are kind of witness statements to be gathered, and there is the question of that participant. Do you want to form LEO of what happened? You know, obviously they're very aggravated and that they're reacting immediately. You know, that's a very difficult call, whether you go forward with that question immediately or whether you wait for them to say it. I think it leads me into maybe a suggestion for a breakout scenario for board members for maybe next year, of actually giving them an incident and let them deal with the mop-up and the legal that we have had. Some real surprises in New Mexico for a small burn. We had an abandoned minor child 1 year where the guardian would not take the child off site and refused to take the child off site. So there's a lot to mob up for board members. Anyway, but my feedback on the scenario was I thought that it was handled extremely well. I think it was an excellent response.
Excellent. Blue Bonnet, you're next.
Couple of things that I noticed. One, when I asked Battalion 4, like, do you want the VR? Like, that's something that's, I guess, common knowledge at flip side, that we have heavy equipment that can be used for lifting, like for effigy build. And what he specifically requested was 2x4s and like screws to physically build something. So I don't know if that's just his personal background with resources available at his burn or not, but just adding that as, I'm sorry?
We don't have VRs. We
That's what I
improvise.
figured. And so that was like, for me, a good learning of, I might be incident commander, you know, what's going on. We might not have fire, we might not have whatever, but thinking of something else that we could use. And then also, I think with our scenario, because once Papa Smurf established command, we were focused on the structural, and like there was a secondary really big incident going on, and Sweeney just kind of stepped in and was kind of the one monitoring-ish this situation. This would have definitely been one where more volunteers would have been needed to throw at the situation. And this is, I think it would be an interesting discussion where that might have been the only volunteers on shift. So how do you handle 2 major incidents at one time when you only have a handful of people?
That's where your sleep channel on the radio and whatever callback systems you have become important. And you know, you hope not too many people are drunk and off duty and are just off duty and can come back in and be resources for an incident big enough to justify calling back the off-duty people. And that's hard to simulate in scenarios like this because we don't have the people to actually come play like they're walking in half asleep and half dressed.
Tangles, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I haven't heard this brought up until now. Like I haven't gone through any ICS training. Like I started it online. Someone mentioned like witness statements on something that it might like lead, you know, there's liability issues. And How do we do that? Is that something that we start immediately? Do we need to let people know, hey, if you witness this, come back? How do we handle witness statements, or if someone can just speak on that topic?
I think witness statements was a little strong. My language was too strong there. I think it was more the fact of basically anyone who's responding. The mop-up is, hey, can you maybe write down what happened? Things get confused. Encourage people maybe take a moment to write down what happened. But also, I think it's it's important, I think, for those conversations to take place. And somebody pointed out, ranger logs, and again, for actuals, there would shift log for actual. But it's not that you want to jump in and start questioning people. I've seen two very inexperienced rangers do that with a sexual assault incident where they started an investigation. No, that's not the vibe. But definitely, I think something like that happens. It's good to have people maybe make contemporaneous notes.
I mean, is there a way? Do we just say, hey, anyone who witnessed this, can I get your name? Is that something that the IC does, or like?
I think it might be as simple as hey, would you like to talk to a board member about what happened?
Okay.
I leave that up to a board member or to your manager of your event, whatever legal structure you have. That's not really the job of the safety volunteers. Now, the incident commander is trying to gather some intel. So, hey, can you tell me what happened or what you see? Helps discover what we need to do to solve the problem. Use your ranger skills about discovery when you walk up on an incident. Apple and those guys teach you all of that. But we're not doing formal investigations. You don't want to go down that road because that could turn into a legal nightmare. You just simply want to know what happened so you can take care of the situation. And if your board or your management wants to go further because, in this case, the car owner was upset, wanted insurance, may have wanted to call in outside legal or law enforcement, then that's a whole nother ball of wax. You want to walk away from that and trust me and let them deal with that. That's what they get paid the big bucks for. Avoid that. You're not trying to do investigation of what happened.
No, thank you. That's good info. I haven't heard that brought up one way or the other. So I didn't. Okay. Thank you.
Good question.
Okay. Any other comments?
I do have a question. How did the one group wrap up the scenario so quickly? Because I think we were still assessing our structure when it's hey, they're finished.
Yeah, no, they were halfway through it when we stopped the other one. Because I came back and I was oh, they already went to the other scenario. So
okay, because I was really how did they do this? What route did we miss going down?
We'd be good.
Yeah, they're good, but they weren't that good.
On these scenarios, we can all role play and add to the role play as much as possible and kind of think about, well, this is what I would do, and that's not what Apple would do, I mean, it's just, the ideal here is we want you to go through these steps and actually say things on that radio. That's the main thing that we want you to do on these drills. It's kind of harder to do that in this virtual realm, but we want you to push the talk button on the radio and say stuff. And this is the place where we say it wrong. Let's make the mistakes here. Let's learn from them. Just like I gave my example yesterday, I made a big mistake doing my scene size up on an actual fire. And instead of my chief coming down on me going, You do that one more time, you're no longer a lieutenant. Instead, it's like, let's turn this into a learning experience. And so I learned a whole lot of things that I'll do differently next time. And space with that. That's what this is about here, is practice, 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 and make the mistakes here and learn. And instead of stop and go, well, what do I say next? Just say stuff, and then we'll talk about it later. Hey, here's some ideas of some things you could have said might have helped the situation. It might not have helped the situation. I mean, we never know until we're there and dealing with this stuff live. So, you know, our takeaway is we want you to understand that everyone on this Zoom meeting is an incident commander. You're going to do this as a dirt ranger, no matter what. Anyway, if that's your job, you're in sanctuary. You're assessing a client who comes into your facility. You're making an assessment and it's doing the same thing. It's a scene size up, but you're seen as a person. And you're trying to make a decision in my next course of action of dealing with the individual. Same thing with medical. And it just so happens that professionally paid medical personnel who attend events, and the same as fire, we have this real world experience. So we're going to apply because it's second nature to us. For the rest of us that don't have professionally skilled positions, we're volunteers. So, hey, what we thought is Safety Side is a great opportunity to give you some tools. Otherwise, in the past, you showed up for a shift, we threw a shirt at you and said, go for it. And go for what? I don't know what I'm doing. We didn't even know how to talk on the radio when we started this crap. You know, Flipside's first medical personnel was a retired nurse. She had a bum hip and couldn't get around. We had to bring, if you were dead or broken arm, we had to drag your ass to her camp. So it's evolved to this, look at this tool that we have today. So practice, 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 that's what it's about. And I'm kind of devolving into our signing off. I don't know if we had anything else to say about these incidences, but
yeah, we only have a few more minutes, so why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll do the last part, and it's basically us saying goodbye. So hopefully.
Another thing I did want to, I know Tangles, I believe you're the one who's like, I'm brand new to this, I'm really learning everything, and just watching like how you interacted in the second scenario and how you're like, hey, I'm a medical person. Can I do this thing? I'd like to do this thing to calm down the participant, and like really bringing in that medical aspect, which you have, which as a ranger, which is what I do, I never would have thought of. And just kind of like jumping in to say this, can I do this to help improve the situation, was very much how it should actually be. Even though it's like I was incident commander, I don't always know what the resources are. And so I thought that was really, really good. And then Goodfellow was also like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing as a sanctuary person. And it's just remembering that it's okay to communicate with the incident commander of not just I'm here, but I'm here and here's what I can offer.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, I'm actually going to go ahead and sign off. It was a great weekend. Thank you guys. And it was cool to meet some of you.
Oh, then good to see you. Thank you.
Likewise, Sparky. Likewise.
I would like to say Tangles did an amazing job on both. She really did well, and I think for stepping up. Same with Papa Smurf. He did a really good job showing up, and boundaries are a thing, and knowing your limits and your capabilities, and knowing when to hand off before it gets to be an issue or something is a really good boundary to have. And somebody else being willing to take up and to do that IC and to step forward for somebody else, I think is really wonderful. And I really appreciate everybody's help. I think everybody did a good job.